Hello, and welcome to the Quietly Visible podcast. I'm your host, Carol Stewart, founder of the Bounding Solutions and author of Quietly Visible, Leading with Influence and Impact as an Introverted Woman. And this is a podcast for introverted women to thrive as leaders and in life. Now, today's topic of conversation is something which is very important for introverts, I think, particularly in busy environments, in the workplace, energy draining environments. So we're going to be talking about energy. And I have with me here today Salvatore Manzi, who's a communications coach. And we're going to be talking about managing your energy in high stake moments. So hello, Salvatore, and welcome.
Hello, Carol. Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you here. And I think this is a very important topic that people who are introverted need to understand about energy and how they manage their energy, because a lot of the work environment can be very depleting of energy. So before we begin, just tell us about who Salvatore is.
Oh, fantastic. I agree. Energy is so important, especially when we are attempting to communicate in any kind of setting. We can get a surge of energy that comes up, and how do we manage that? How do we navigate high stakes situations where we're in the spotlight, especially if it's all of a sudden? As an introvert myself, I don't like being put on the spot, but we don't always have that liberty. My name is Salvatore. I grew up in Kansas in the middle of America, and my father was a public speaker. And so I followed in his footsteps. And as I was getting on the stages, I realized I didn't crave the spotlight as much as I enjoyed helping other people get up on and into that spotlight. It helped me also learn that most of the communication training is geared towards extroverts, how to polish your presentation, how to use your charisma and extrovertedness in a different setting. Not a lot are geared towards introverts and how to shine, manage energy, use the tools that we use in a public speaking or a presentation setting. So I dove deep into the research around psychology and neuroscience of how the brain works to understand information, how we connect to other people. And I've created a series of frameworks to help us understand our content. As an introvert, if I have a framework, I can follow it and I can
Mm.
sketch it out on the paper while people are talking. I the first is the content, the second is delivery. I went to acting classes and then I went to improv and then stand up just to see the different varieties and understand how do people use their body to communicate. I went to improv to get myself out of my own shell and learn how to be less self-conscious. I learned a lot from that. And the third part is presence. What is it that really helps a person to command the room, show up with a sense of presence in a meeting or in a conversation? And so, using strategies and techniques from those, I now coach leaders on how to show up in meetings or on big stages as we go. And love to dive into specifics on any of those, but we are focused on energy and how to manage energy in those moments.
Mm. Yeah, very interesting, and the topics that you talk about are, I think, very much needed. And what you say about a lot of communication training being designed for extroverts is, yeah, that is so true. So tell us about, how do people manage their energy? How do introverts in particular manage their energy in high stake moments?
I would love to hear your tips and techniques on this as well. My
Mhm.
go-to for an introvert in that moment of spotlight when it's suddenly been turned on is to give yourself the grace of taking a breath and taking a pause
Mm.
and letting the audience also know that the message was received. Like we don't want to have a deer in the headlights kind of stunned look. And we don't want to pause too long. There's something called the delay bias. We have an
Mhm.
unconscious bias when a person doesn't immediately answer to a question. We wonder if they actually are fully there. So in an introverted way, when I get a question on the spotlight like that, I will stop and turn and be like, ah, I appreciate the question, or I appreciate that we're having this conversation, or I start with the words I appreciate. And it
Hmm.
forces me to acknowledge receiving the spotlight or the attention, but it gives me a moment to buy time for myself. And so I appreciate, and then I'll say something like, let me give this a thought. Or I'll use my hand tapping against my head to gesture that, ah, yes, or I'll tap my chin in some way to let the listeners know that I'm listening. That moment of grace to allow me to rebalance is when I start doing my strategies. And that's what we'll get into. Those
Hmm.
strategies are with your breath, with your posture, and with a framework. But before I
Yeah.
jump into there, what is your go-to? Somebody turns to you quickly and says, "What do you think, Carol?" Like, how do you manage your energy in that moment?
Yeah, so for me, I will pause and I will acknowledge what it is that they've asked me, and I will pause. And if I need to have time to think about it, what I will do is I will say what my initial thoughts are, what initially comes to mind, and I'll just say that once I've thought about this some more, then if I've got anything further to add, I'll add it.
Yeah, I
If
love that. I love that.
mm,
Yeah. When
you
the
know,
spotlight comes like out of the blue like that, it does sort of like command us to have an immediate response like that. So I like
mhm,
the pivot you're going.
yeah,
Switching just a
because
little bit
because
to, oh,
some people become very anxious about that, and then that brings on that performance anxiety because the communication anxiety, they feel so anxious, and then it's like a vicious circle, isn't it?
yeah, it
Mm,
goes into a loop. We go into fight, flight, freeze, and then we
mm,
don't have the access to the frontal lobe where we can our content and what we want to say because we're in this survival mechanism.
mm,
Shuts us down. It can be debilitating. Um, let's also present another scenario where I wasn't just put on the spot, but it is a high stakes meeting. This is a high stakes event where I'm expected to present some findings or drive a conversation or
mm,
create influence in the room around my vision or project. That is a
mm,
high stakes situation where going into it, I know it's going to be high stakes. So we want to look at a few things. First is the breath. Now, a lot of communication coaches or public speaking training will say, breathe, take a deep breath, right? No, it's the opposite. When we take a deep breath, it fills our chest cavity, gets our heart into a larger cavity, so our heart has to beat faster. You do want to breathe, you don't want to pass out, right? So you do want to take a breath, but it's the exhale that actually calms the nervous system. So if
mhm.
I'm going into a high stakes meeting, my first technique is to do box breathing. Are you familiar with box breathing?
Yes, I am. Yes, yes, because that's a technique that I encourage my clients to adopt. Yeah.
Exactly. To breathe in, hold the inhale, extend and lengthen the exhale, and then hold the exhale for even longer. It's the exhale and holding the exhale that actually allows the heart to calm down to
Hmm.
stop beating so fast. I always say do three. Do at least three box breaths before a high stakes moment so that you can control your breathing and your body, your physiology a little better. The second technique that I would offer is in releasing the energy. Now, there's a both and here. Contextually, you may not have the opportunity to get up and shake around and release the energy, right? You might be stuck at a meeting or on a panel and you can't really. So, energy that's being bottled up in the body is going to come out in the voice in a very strange way. What we need to do is find a way to release it physically. So that might be just gripping and releasing the hands out of sight from everybody else. It might be just from tensing the whole body up and then releasing it, doing it in a way that isn't visible to other people, but allowing me to burn up the excess energy and then release it. If I do have the liberty of being backstage or in another conference room, I dance. I will get up and dance. I will let it all. out. I don't know what your favorite song is, but I typically go towards funk, and I get a little
Mm.
more bounce to the ounce kind of thing going in my room. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I'm going to do a talk or something, or even say like a virtual thing, and I'm on my own, then I'll put some music on and I'll dance before I go into it as well. Yeah,
do you have a
but
theme song?
uh, oh, anything sort of fast and funky or sort of upbeat, lively. That's yeah, just gets me up and dancing. That sort of lifts my mood as well. But I hadn't heard about the technique, what you described about sort of just clenching, and I can see how that could really benefit as well. I hadn't heard about that, so that's something new for me. Mm,
Cool. I work with a lot of venture capitalists who
hmm
are in high stake investor meetings, and they don't have the liberty of getting up from the table and releasing that energy. So doing some sort of clenching, even in just the lower part of the body,
hmm
allows it allows it to expel. I got the information from Jane Goodall. She studied chimpanzees and the way that they interact. And whenever there is some sort of external stimulus that impacts the collective, they all begin to move in a way in reaction to it. They all release the energy. And it sounds like they're fighting or it sounds like they're upset, but all they're doing is just releasing the energy so that they can refocus on what needs to be done.
mm
Um, so yeah, breath. The second is releasing the energy. The third is just about taking up space. And here's a something I'm sure that we can converse about for a while because leadership presence is about how we are showing up physically in the space as well. So
hmm
even though it's a high stakes moment, my inclination will be to comfort, to close down, to sort of restrict, maybe even touch myself and cross my legs or shrink a little bit. Physically forcing myself into a posture of openness,
hmm
even keeping my palms open on my lap if I'm seated or having them front facing, keeping my legs uncrossed and grounded. That sort of physicality sends a message to the nervous system that it's okay. It's okay to be fully here and fully present. So
Yes, and I can see how that can help. And is that something along the lines of power poses, Amy
I
Cuddy's power
do,
poses? Is that
I believe power poses work only from my own
mhm,
experience. Amy Covey's research is a little bit challenged. People have pushed back
mm,
on her methodologies and such, and I I don't care. I think the power
yeah,
pose actually work. If I can do a power pose, I will definitely do it. Just hands on hips or leaning back in your seat a little bit if you have that opportunity. It sends a physiological message to the brain that it's okay. It's okay to
mm,
be here. It's okay to take up space. Um,
mhm,
the body is responding to the brain as much as the brain is responding to the body. Do you do any
yeah.
power poses?
I I I mean I'm not necessarily power poses, but that expansion I
Mm.
I do, try and expand myself rather than because sometimes you can find yourself if you're aware of it, and a lot of people aren't aware, you try and shrink yourself. You try and when you speak, you try and speak more quickly because you just want to
Right.
hurry up and get it over with, and it's like you're just trying to hide yourself. But I will make an effort of sort of stand if I'm standing up, just maybe stand with my legs apart and shoulders up and back, sort of thing, rather than shrinking and then letting myself shrink because if I'm trying to hide under something, yeah. Mm.
It's real. It's what we naturally want to do in a survival role. And you brought up
Mm.
the shoulders. There's research that shows you can tell a person's sense of confidence by how far their shoulder is from their ear. The
Oh.
further, the further away their shoulders are from their ear, the more they're sticking their neck out, literally, the more
hmm
confident they appear. So it's a good I call it a reset, right? In between, I don't know about you, but I oftentimes have meeting. So in between each meeting, I do a physical reset where I roll my shoulders back and down. I bring my chest
hmm
up. and I get into a state where my ear and my shoulder are far. That way, when I get into the next meeting, I show up looking confident and I have presence, no matter how high stakes or what I've had going before.
Yeah. Yeah, very
The,
interesting. Mm. Yeah,
yeah,
another thing that I find when so when I did my TEDx talk, and with the TEDx talk, I don't know if you're aware if you've done one or not, but you have to learn your talk word for word because you have to send it to the TED company, like word for word what you're going to say. And when I was doing my TEDx talk, my mind started to race ahead, and then I forgot what was coming next. And I think if I didn't know all these techniques, I could have just let my mind, I could have got into a panic. But I just acknowledged what was going on and thought, well, I haven't got time to worry about this now, and just brought my mind back to the present so that
well
I could
done.
carry on. And I carried on, and I don't think anybody noticed. So I
That
didn't
is
get
a, I
things in
mean,
the exact order, but I don't think no one noticed.
yeah, there's something called the spotlight effect. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. The idea that people are paying more attention to us than we actually think. And the
Mm-hmm.
example of this is if you've ever tripped, you usually would look up to see if anybody noticed you've tripped, right? That's the spotlight effect. It's that sense of like, oh, somebody saw, and people don't notice.
Mm-hmm.
People and nervousness and excitement look very similar on the surface. So if a speaker is showing up nervous, there's a point where it could still be perceived as excitement, and
Mm-hmm.
not nobody would notice. Yeah, TED and TEDx talks, they are challenging for many reasons. You are confined to that small space. You have to have a script. It has to be prepared. I think you did a wonderful job. And also, I wanted to comment on your book. Your book is so amazing. Thank you
Oh,
for that
thank you, thank
beautiful
you.
book. Yeah, quietly visible. Ah, it's just a godsend to so many. Um, but anyway, getting into that, the neck and the shoulder is a really important thing. The other part that I wanted to bring in is the idea of we want to talk faster, we want to get it over with, we kind of want to lean in and because the nerves are pushing us.
Mm-hmm.
If we can intentionally pull back, research shows if you can just go 5% slower than the rest of the room, to have a sense of composure, I'm using air quotes right now, to have that sense of composure in oneself, it conveys a sense of both authority as well as presence while you're communicating whatever it is. So,
Mm-hmm.
in that initial moment, helpful to manage the energy of just giving yourself permission to slow down for that first initial start. There's also a reason to do this just in communication because everybody has an accent and the accent is different to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes our ears up to 30 seconds to calibrate to a new accent. So anytime I'm speaking to a new room, if I intentionally slow down with my first couple of sentences, I'm making it easier for my listener to catch up with me. But as an introvert, it's giving me the opportunity to self-regulate and recalibrate to what's
Yeah.
going on and being present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with that also pauses. What are your thoughts on using
Oh,
pauses?
you said the magic word, pauses. Like
Mm,
that is where the magic happens as a
yeah.
communicator. I'll do a couple of quick hits on pauses. First of all, people often hesitate to pause because they think they're gonna lose their listeners' attention and they're not gonna be able to change their mind.
Mm,
Truth is, listeners don't change their mind while you're talking. They change it when when you stop and they have a moment to process what you're saying. So the pause is critical to actually create the change that you're hoping for in your listeners. Take the pause. But here's the key. If you pause at a period or a comma, those are expected. People are expecting that kind of a pacing. It's the end of a sentence, it's the end of a comma. And that's where people might interrupt you. right? Especially in a
Mhm.
fast-paced environment, people are going to jump in at the periods or commas. So train yourself to pause where it's not really necessary. It's called an anticipatory pause. Become the master of the anticipatory pause, and you will enable yourself to hold an audience's attention longer. It takes
Mm.
skill, it takes practice. And at first, as we're doing it, it sounds a little bit performative, but eventually it starts to sound right. And I can tell you 100%, I've worked with nearly 1,000 clients over the last 20 years, and every one of them pushes back on the pause. No, that's too long. I don't want to do it that long. But then when somebody else hears them do that pause, the feedback is always, oh no, that was perfect. That was exactly right.
Yes.
Pauses always feel longer for the speaker than it does for the listener. My coach had me do
Mm.
a 10-second pause. I don't know if you listen to Seth Godin. You know Seth Godin? He's a
Yes.
thought leader here in the States. He recommends 1 to 2 second pause. People will think that you lost your space.
Mhm.
So here's the aha. Just make it a third second. People will think your pause is on purpose, right? So there's the easy part. But he says, and I love this, if you can get up to 10-second pause, even the people that are on their phones or completely distracted are going to look up and see what is it that what's coming out next, right? So get comfort with our own discomfort because it creates comfort for our listeners, the pause. What are your thoughts on the pause? I just
Yeah.
did a whole like
I,
litany.
I, I think the pauses are great. The person I think is really good at this was President Barack Obama. He had it mastered, and there's even a YouTube video doing one of his speeches. I can't remember which speech it was, where it's just they've just video put together a video of his pauses in that speech just to show
Really?
how
I want to see this
yes,
video.
I think he's a yeah, I can't remember which speech it was, but maybe just go on YouTube and search for Barack Obama's pauses, and it's the whole video of his pauses in doing that speech.
I
And
love
I always use him to illustrate the power of the pause.
He is the pinnacle. They actually, in some people in our industry, will call it the Obama pause because he is so famous for, and it's it's wonderful to watch his technique because somebody will ask him a question and he will take the most lengthy pause imaginable before answering. But
Mm,
he doesn't leave the listener wondering if he's misunderstood or not present. Like he's able to still hold the room in that pause
mm.
because he is so good, so skilled at holding pauses. Yeah, if only I could. He is such a great orator.
Yes, yes.
High
Mhm.
watermark for that.
And a lot of particularly, my audience are introverted women. They worry about things like that, and worry that they have to answer quickly if they're in a meeting. They have to respond quickly. They can't just stop and think. They've just got to, yeah, and that causes a lot of anxiety for them.
It really does. Yeah, I
Mm.
work almost primarily with STEM professionals, scientists, analysts, engineers, and a lot of women, a lot of those women, and they don't always self-identify as introverts, but that
Mhm.
is a part of it. And that pressure to not only have an answer immediately, but as an introvert, I'm calculating thousands of things in my head before I speak. We're known to think before we speak. So when
Mm.
we're put on the spot and we don't have a chance to fully form all of our thoughts, it's not easy to jump in there. One little hack I offer for those situations is to say, well, there are two things. When somebody
Yes.
asks me something and they want me to get to an immediate answer, well, how would you respond to this? Well, I would answer that in two ways. And by doing that, what I've done, I've given myself a back door. I can
Mm-hmm.
say the first thought that came, and while I'm talking about that, my brain has the chance to form, and then I say, and then on a second point, there's also da 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 da, and I'm able to land the plane and actually share what I had a chance to more fully form.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't end up with a second one, I don't need to. And if I want, I can say, actually, there's a third point I'd like to make too, giving myself the grace. But opening up with that, well, there's two things. Well, I would like to say two things about that. Or let me share two things. It gives me, as an introvert, permission not to have the perfect answer first and
Mm-hmm.
allow me to move into the second.
Yeah, great idea that. Yeah. I once had a client who for this was a challenge, and she said to me, oh, she wishes that she could be like her extroverted colleagues because they're so confident in meetings, they just speak off the cuff. And I said to her, so when they're speaking, what are they actually saying? And then she thought about it and she said, no, they're not really saying anything until they get to their point. And so I said, well, what's the reason why you want to be like that then? And then she thought about it and she said, well, I don't actually. I just want to be able to speak as myself, do it confidently. So she was just mistaking the fact that they speak a lot. They just, somebody asks them something, they just start speaking straight away, even though there's not necessarily anything of substance until they get to their point. She was mistaking that for confidence.
Yeah, there is something, it's easy to misinterpret. They capture
Mm,
the room. They extroverts have learned to be charming at the beginning. And so, yes, I'm taking you on a ride. I'm taking you on this whole train of thought to try to get to my point.
mm,
I, as an introvert, would prefer that we waited and just got to the train station and you told me what the thought was. I don't need to go
mm,
along the whole way. But they have an ability to bring us along and make it sound exciting as we're getting there. And
yeah.
to your point, I don't think that it's the goal to try to sound extroverted in a meeting. I think the
Mm,
goal is to find ways to hold the attention of the room without saying anything.
yeah.
Right?
No, that
Finding a way
and that is a
to,
great way to look at it in that way. Uh-huh. Yeah.
yeah,
It takes the
finding
pressure
a
off
way to
as
let
well.
them know I'm thinking about it, or this is what I appreciate about your question. My opening thoughts are this, something to like throw them a little bit of a bone in order to get them to stay focused while you are formulating your thoughts. And
Mm,
I highly encourage saying, that's the great question that I want to get back to. Can I get back to you? And don't
yeah.
put myself on the spot to have the perfect answer every time.
Yes, and I think some people are sometimes are afraid of saying that. But I always encourage them. Well, there's there's nothing wrong if you don't have to know everything. And if someone asks you something and you don't know, then or you need a bit more time to think, just let them know that you want to process the information. You'll let them know. When I was doing the research for my book, and one senior vice president, she said that when she joined the organization, she said to people, if you want me to make a decision on the spot, she said, I can say what I think, but it won't be my best decision. She said, if you want me to make a good decision, I need time to process the information. And so she set the scene from day one.
That is that is so beautiful. I love
Mm,
that. Setting expectations is
yeah.
cool. The
Mm,
other thing I found really helps introverts in communication is speaking in metaphors. Because I find as an introvert, I can process a lot in my mind, and I get to a conclusion and then give people the conclusion that I had. And people
mm,
don't always understand how I got from A to B on that. Using a metaphor helps bring to life the conclusion that I got to without making them feel like they lost the whole plot. So finding ways
right.
to also color in my point with some sort of an example or analogy is also
Mm.
helpful.
Yeah. Now this is a really interesting topic. So how do you work with people in what sort of Do you do one-to-one? Do you do it in groups? How do you work?
Most, I typically work with tech, data-driven people that are they've moved either into a position or leadership, or they've taken their idea and started a company. So they're at a startup. So they oftentimes have a team of 5 to 50. And I work with them individually and learning how to make their data understandable to everyday people, so that they can make complex concepts very clear and compelling. And once I've worked with them for a while, I then start to work with their teams oftentimes and elevating communication and creating more inclusive, high-performing teams through
Mm,
having better communication agreements and understanding how to lean on each other's strengths in order to like know how to communicate with each other. There's something called a communications manual. I don't know if you've ever heard about this. Um,
mm,
a team will, yeah, you've heard like, what is your preferred measure of communication? And do you like direct or do you want it sub? And how do you like feedback? And just knowing those things about each other. So I'll work with the leader and then I typically work with the team to make sure that the entire team is elevated in the way that they are communicating
mm.
with each other.
Okay. And what's the best way for people to find out about your work?
I
Where's the
would
best
love for
place for them
them
to
to
go?
find me. Oh yeah, I would love for them to find me on LinkedIn, Salvatore Manzi, or go to my website, salvatoremanzi.com. I hope to have my book coming out very soon. It's called Clear and Compelling. And once that's done, maybe in June, they'll be able to access that on Amazon as well.
Yeah, so that sounds an interesting title. Just by the title alone. So, what's your book about? Tell
The
us a bit
book
about
is
it.
for big thinkers that are expressing bold ideas, and it's the frameworks that we can rely on as introverts, as data-driven people, frameworks that help make the information understandable, and then delivery tools and techniques that help to make sure that the way we're delivering that information meshes with our content, and then ideas and concepts around presence, how to strategically show up in a meeting with the authority and agency that is necessary in the context of that situation.
Sounds great. Look forward
Thank you.
to that coming out in June. Well, thank you. This has been a really interesting discussion and one which I know my audience will get great value from. You share
I
some
would love to hear
great
from each and every one of them.
techniques. So listeners, do check Salvatore out. We will share a link to your LinkedIn on the show notes. So it's been a great conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carol. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and to be on your show.
Thank you. So listeners, do go and check Salvatore out and make sure that when June comes that you get his book. It sounds like a great book, so do go and get his book. And if you're wanting to increase your confidence, influence, and impact, if you haven't completed my free assessment, go to my website, aboundingsolutions.com. There's an assessment that you can complete that will give you ideas about areas that you can focus on. And so until the next time, bye.